When it comes to comics, one of the hardest questions to answer is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many years of continuity and an endless amount of series to choose from, finding a starting point can be difficult, but that's where this series comes in. Each week, I look at all the new comics coming out to pick out ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new series, and trades and graphic novels coming out. And then I finish things up by picking my pick of the week, the starting point I'm most excited about coming out this week. Let's start this video off by looking at notable new series coming out this week. Series, I try to pick the biggest comic, the biggest new book that is going to be released that given week. And this week, I guess if you're going to go biggest, why not start with Planet Sized? And that's the case with Planet Sized X-Men #1. And I actually kind of debated, do I put this in new arcs or do I put this in new #1s? Because this is very much in the vein of like reshaping the current landscape of the X-Men world. This is written by Jerry Dugan with art by Pepe Larraz. Jonathan Hickman's also attached, probably with a story credit, but this is going to kind of reshape again the X-Men universe. We've been having the Hellfire Gala, and now this is going to kind of lead into the new X-Men one with the new team, and then also potentially the Jonathan Hickman Inferno book. And basically we've been having all these different chapters with the X-Men book, and this is the next new chapter. They all the advertisements about how giant-sized X-Men reshaped the X-Men world for the new, and this is going to do it even further. So, I mean, that's a lot of lofty praise or a lot of hype to build up behind a book, but I guess if there's any run that's going to do it, it is this. Run does kind of need something like this because you can tell that it's shifting its focus. The Hellfire Gala, you're seeing a lot of cracks form within the X-Men universe, and we've always been on this island for some time. So where do they go from here? And I think we'll get that with this book. So if you're enjoying the X-Men line, this is one you're going to want to pick up. If maybe you're a person that dropped off of it, maybe you loved House of X and Powers of X and all that great stuff, and the other stuff wasn't doing for you, maybe it'd be a good time to jump back in as it's kind of reshaping what things will be looking like moving forward. This week is actually full of a lot of big new series debuting. Static Shock Season 1 #1, and this is bringing back the Milestone universe, but in a new form. DC's been doing a lot of the Milestone reprints and some digital stuff, but this is going to be really, I think, the book that helps relaunch this new era of Milestone comics. And people don't know, Milestone was a comic company in the 90s that did eventually partner with DC. And, it's an African-American company that focused on African-American characters, one of the most notable being Static Shock. I actually never read Milestone comics at the time. I was out of the world of comic books, but I did watch and really enjoy the Static Shock cartoon that did debut and was around that time, which obviously a little different than the actual comic itself, but I am excited to see this new era. I'm hoping this will shine a light on Milestone comics and how important they were at the time. It's great that they're coming back. So if you love Milestone and you're kind of missing it, we're seeing a new era in that with new creative teams and kind of new voices on these characters, and certainly a great opportunity because these characters are really good characters that have just kind of been sitting on the sidelines for far too long. It's great that they're coming back. So if you're at all interested, know that we'll get the new issue this Wednesday. Another big new #1 coming out this week is Jupiter's Legacy Requiem #1. This is written by Mark Miller and with art by Tommy Lee Edwards. I do wonder if this series is going to maybe have a little bit of a lackluster desire for people, knowing that the fact that the TV show has been canceled, which is a bit unfortunate. I didn't get the chance to watch most of it, and now I'm less inclined to kind of go back to it. I have enjoyed the actual comic book, though, in large part due to the art of Frank Quietly, who's not on this. I do like Tommy Lee Edwards' art. He's a pretty good artist, but I don't think to the same level. Well, it's very different styles compared to Quietly. But if you are a huge fan of the Jupiter Legacy books, there's been a lot of different installments of them, and you want to continue with that universe. If you're sad that the TV show has been canceled, it ended on a cliffhanger, as people have been mentioning. So if you're sad that happened and you want to know what happened next, you may not be able to watch the live action version, but do know the comics are out there, and we'll get a new chapter this week. Also coming out this week is Compass #1, and this is written by Robert McKenzie with art by Dave Walker, and Greg Rucka has his name on this. He's not behind the creative team. He's basically the producer of this book, Compass, and this book seems to be dealing with time travel. It's dealing with this individual who is part scholar, mathematician, scientist, person who can also fight, and she's traveling through different times. She comes from the golden age of Baghdad, but it looks like this is going to be going to the 13th century Welsh Empire, and she'll be kind of conversing and traveling different times and different periods, which it kind of makes sense because Greg Rucka does kind of like to do that. It has compared itself to something like Old Guard, for example. These creators have worked on previous installments of Old Guard, so that makes sense. If you like that book, you like past Greg Rucka work. He seems to really have a lot of faith in this book. I mean, it starts with Greg Rucka proudly presents, which is kind of cool. You do like it when kind of you see established creators like a Greg Rucka putting their name behind a book or to help a book that are with creators that are kind of maybe not to that same level. Obviously you see it a lot with movies and things of that nature, and what you typically will see is like a co-writing credit on something at times where it's like, this is written by Michael Bendis and somebody else, and really it's that somebody else is doing the most of the work, but they're putting their name on it to think, hey, maybe more people will check it out. But I do like the premise of this book. I mean, I am a fan of time travel stories. The general look and vibe of the book is a bit different, as a huge fan of Old Guard as well. So there's a lot here to be excited about. Greg Rucka is someone I do trust when it comes to putting books together. So one would assume if he's really faithful in this book, there's reasons to be. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of big number ones this week, and this might be more on the smaller side, but I think it has potential to be just as good and maybe a nice surprise hit for the week. Coming out this week from Aftershock Comics is Seven Swords #1, and this is written by Ricardo Latino, who is not necessarily a name people may know from the world of comics, but he has worked a lot in Hollywood, making movies, helping make movies and write movies like Divergent, the Snow White and the Huntsman movie. So he's now coming into the world of comics, and sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Like, for example, Chris Cantwell, who was a TV writer for Halt and Catch Fire, I think has been doing fantastic work in the world of comics. Will that be the case here? We shall see. The book itself seems to be this swashbuckling adventure where you have this evil monarch that's taking control, and this individual is trying to win back control. And over to do that, he needs to team up with all these different people from across the world. They're trying to capture and get these different seven swords to get the power they need. There's some mystical elements as well, so maybe a touch of fantasy. And considering where he's coming from with something like Snow White and the Huntsman, I'm wondering if it's going to have something similar to that vibe, or your kind of swashbuckling tale of old, maybe something like Pirates of the Caribbean. Just looking at the cover, it does give me that type of vibe. So anytime you have someone that is shifting over to a different medium, there's reasons to be hesitant. It's a different type of writing style. Like I said, it can work, but maybe there'll be something that can start as a comic and become something more. I do like that type of adventure book. Those can be a lot of fun. Something that's not necessarily all that serious. We shall see how it actually turns out in the end this week. Coming out this week from Boom is Save Yourself #1, and this is from their Boombox line, which tends to shift more to the YA kid level focus. And this creative team has worked in the past. I have not personally had a lot of experience with them, but they do seem to come in with a lot of acclaim, known for their work on the series Pandora Legacy, and they're now coming together for this book. The book itself is about these three witches, these three magical beings who saved the world at one point and are now kind of these pseudo celebrities that people celebrate. What we're finding out, though, is that someone is discovering, as they are fighting another magical beast, some secrets behind their actual triumph. Maybe they aren't the people that they say they are. What will that actually lead to? What's going on here? And Boom is usually pretty solid with these books. I mean, when you look at the art style, it's certainly very anime, manga influence. So if you really enjoy that, the Boombox really has a pretty established tone. Like I said, the YA audience is usually right up that alley. So something that should be appropriate if you have a kid or something like that. Boom has done a really good job. Comes to getting original series that are appropriate for kids, thinking of things like Fence, for example, which was this book about fencing that actually was pretty good. Like, I didn't think I'd ever enjoy a book like that about people in a fencing club, but it was rather solid. It seems like obviously this is more dealing on the fantasy side, but maybe a light fantasy. And if you're a fan of their past work, the Pandora's Legacy, if that's something you did enjoy, know that they'll be having a new series coming out this week. Let's move over to the world of ongoing series, starting new arcs, starting with Justice League #63. This issue begins the trial of Naomi, who is obviously a character that's becoming more and more prominent within the DC universe. I did really enjoy her debut series, which was done by Michael Bendis, who of course is still writing Justice League. When it comes to Justice League, I've not been reading it. I like Bendis a lot as a writer. at least I did a lot of his older stuff, but his Superman stuff wasn't necessarily clicking with me. When I read the first issue of this, it felt the same way. And I know there's a lot of people that have not been clicking with his work with DC. Obviously, he has a lot of fans as well. But if you are looking for an opportunity to get into a Justice League book, because I do know there are a lot of fans of the Naomi character. She has that new CW series that should be coming out shortly. So this might help give you some idea of what that character is like. I do like her as a character. I think she is a strong character. That is something I will give Bendis. He is really good at creating new characters that have a pretty long longevity, or at least rewriting characters or making them stronger. Thinking of things like he did with Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Miles Morales, Naomi now, and some people I know take issue with the fact that he's putting a focus on that character, but to me that makes sense in a way. Like if you always have so many Batman stories, you have so many Superman stories, the way you make characters stick is you put them in prominence and you make people care about them and you write good stories behind them. So, we'll see how that goes. If you're interested and maybe you were thinking about jumping into Justice League, this might be a good point. I know there's a lot of Justice League fans. Like I said, though, like I haven't been digging this run, or I just wasn't clicking with me. It may work for you, and you can check out the new issue this week. Also starting a new arc this week is the Silver Coin #3. This issue is written by Ed Brisson with art by Michael Walsh, and this is another anthology series that actually have been really prominent in the world of comics as of late. And what's different about this one, though, is that instead of something like Ha Ha, where you have the same writer and a different artist, here Michael Walsh is the same artist every time, but you get a different writer, this time Ed Brisson. And this issue focuses on a home invasion gone wrong, but the people are able to kind of get away with it, and they find a lot of luck in this lucky coin, but it helps them go down darker and darker paths. So I know a lot of people didn't like the second issue of the Silver Coin. A lot of the reviews I've read or watched, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I know one of the biggest issues I saw was they didn't utilize the coin that much. That wasn't really a big problem for me. But it does seem like this issue will focus more on the aspect of the coin and how it brings you luck, and how that luck may actually eventually run out in one phase or another. And that's what this series has been about. It started with this magical coin this guy found, and they were on this band, and this band ended up playing really, really well because of this coin. And of course, as things often go, that didn't end up well in the end. Now, again, this is really more dealing with, instead of being a crime story, or instead of it being a story about a band, it's a story about a crime gone wrong, and what can that lead to. So I'm interested. Ed Brisson is a writer I do like. I don't have the same type of admiration for some of the other writers who will be on this, but I think he's successful, and he certainly seems like someone who could write towards the more horror genre. But really, I do think the star of the show has been Michael Walsh and his art, because even the second issue, which I didn't dig, it always looked gorgeous, and so did the first issue. So if that can maintain, and also this has just been recently announced that this is now an ongoing. It was designed to be a mini, but it was successful enough to keep it going, which is great. I do love anthology series, and I do love the fact that we're getting more and more people writing this. And so if you're a person who has loved things like Ice Cream Man or Ha Ha, this is something that you may find just as good. How we've had a lot of anthology series, and that continues with Superman Red and Blue #4, and we've had a lot of these. We had Batman Black and White, Wolverine Red and White, Red and Black. There's been a lot of them. Carnage had a book. It's really been never ending, and even like Ren Sonia. But now Superman has his, and it's red and blue. I've been enjoying these here and there. They're a mixture of short stories by different creators, and some of the creative teams have been stronger than others. But I think the highlight of this issue is knowing that Mark Waid will be actually writing a story. And Mark Waid, for a very long time, has not done anything with DC. And if you want to know why, look it up. There's just a lot of personal drama with him and certain people that work at DC. Now that there's been some regime change within the DC universe, I think he's now kind of back, and he's written a few things. I think he was on a Batman anthology a little bit while ago as well, but now he's writing Superman, and he's written a lot of great Superman books in the past. Superman Birthright, I think, is maybe his most notable, or maybe Kingdom Come, which I guess technically is a Superman story. I see it more than a Superman story, but I guess at the heart of it is a Superman tale. So if you're a huge Mark Waid fan, he's obviously not the only one on this. He was just the most notable name I saw. I do love these short stories, and just the premise of trying to maintain this certain color choice, which has been pretty good. It's not been my favorite of all the anthology series. I thought it started off well with a few of the issues, but all in all, it's been okay. But as a huge Superman fan, you never know. The next issue can be the best issue because again, you get a whole new slew of creators, and you'll get a whole new slew of stories. So hopefully, this issue will be the best one yet. I'm super excited to put this book on the list, and it's Usagi Yojimbo number 20. And this is Usagi number 1. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but this is a pretty big issue for Usagi Yojimbo because it's an introduction to this brand new character to the Usagi Yojimbo universe, which doesn't happen. I will say it doesn't happen every day, but really every issue it tends to have new characters. But this is going to be a reoccurring character, and I'm not a person that talks about first appearances because I don't care about that type of stuff. But knowing Stan Sakai, he doesn't make decisions like this because he cares about speculation, he cares about story, and really why I'm bringing it up is because Usagi Yojimbo continues to be one of the best comic books out on the stands. It was just again nominated for Best Continuing Series Eisner, and it's still deserved. Despite the fact that this book is older than I am, which is pretty impressive, it's still very welcoming to new readers. So despite the fact, this is issue 20, but really this is probably issue like 600 or I don't even know where, maybe 300 or so of actual Usagi Yojimbo, you can go in not reading anything else for pretty much any issue, and you'll be able to understand it because I think Stan Sakai is really great at just bringing you in as a writer. His stories, there's a simplicity to them that seems like, oh, this is a really kind of basic story, but there's a lot of complexity within that, and just he's really good at character, and again, his cartooning is always on point. So I've been really loving Usagi Yojimbo. I was really, really late to the party of Usagi Yojimbo. I just really got into it when he was ending his run at Dark Horse, and now he's doing his IDW stuff. I was a little worried with it being in color because I'm like, is that just a gimmick? But it's been in color before, and it still works out really well. So if you're a person that's been at all hesitant, who's never read a Usagi Yojimbo book, I highly advise checking it out. If you're a person who loves creating comics, if you're a comic book writer or artist, whatever, read Usagi Yojimbo because I think you'll get a great lesson on how to write stories and how to write stories that are welcoming to new readers, which is a skill that I don't think is nearly as strong with a lot of writers today as it is with Stan Sakai. I mean, he is a legend, so it's hard to compare him to everyone else, but I'm really excited to see how this issue turns out this week. The last ongoing series starting a new arc this week we're going to talk about is Norse Mythology number 1, and you'd be like, well, this is a number 1, why didn't you include it in the number 1s? Because it's that Dark Horse thing that they tend to do a lot, where yes, this is a number 1, but technically it's the second season. There was this one season of Norse Mythology, and now we're getting another season, but this is new issue number 1. And if you're confused at all, ultimately just know this is Neil Gaiman and other creators and artists taking on Norse Mythology tales and doing their own little spin on them. And I've been really liking this book, and a lot of the stories do tend to not be connected. They tend to be their own thing. And there have been multiple stories in a lot of the issues as well. One of my favorites was actually dealing with a character that I can't remember any of the names, but it was dealing with the wolf beast, and they're trying to find ways of tricking him in order to get his different prizes. And obviously, like, Norse mythology is used a lot in the Marvel universe. This is a very different take on them. These characters, like when they do have characters like Thor, they're not as heroic. You see more of the fault of the gods and the hubris of the gods with that Neil Gaiman like take. And he's not the only writer on this, but if you are a Neil Gaiman fan, you do like his style, I do think it does really fit into that. It's been a really surprising good series that's been somewhat overlooked, but really strong. Not every issue has been great. And obviously, when you have shifting creators and artists and stuff like that, sometimes it'll be better than others. If you do like myths, you do love fantasy, this will be a book I would advise you checking out. And like I said, the good thing about this, even if you miss one issue, don't be worried. Like I didn't read season 1. Am I going to understand it? My guess is probably yes. Like, a lot of these stories are standalone, so you can go in fresh, not have to worry. I mean, these are ancient stories it's basing things off of, so these are, characters you probably know in some shape or form. Obviously, there are different versions of them, but their core is pretty similar, despite the fact that these are different takes. Now that we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, let's move over to the world of trades, graphic novels, and collections, starting with Locke and Key, Keyhouse, Compendium. And Locke and Key is probably the most acclaimed series IDW has put out, at least in the last decade. It's really garnered a lot of fans, and now had its own Netflix show. So if you are a huge fan of this, maybe you love the Netflix show, never read the comic, do know you're going to get the entire collection out, or at least part of the collection. You know, there's been like spin-off miniseries that have come out not too long ago. You had the kind of the crossover with the Sandman universe as well. This is, I think, just collecting the first major series. So this is obviously written by Joe Hill and art by Gabriel Rodriguez. So if you're a huge fan of this book, you've really enjoyed it, or you've always wanted to dive in and actually check out the comic book and seeing is it as good as people say, I will say this is a really solid book. This is a type of horror story that I think would appeal to people that aren't even really horror fans, and I think calling it horror almost minimizes it in a way. I think its genre is much more than that. So I think the TV show, the Netflix show, did a pretty good job of capturing what the comic is. It's obviously a different flavor because live action versus, the comic book. But in general, I think if you like one, you most likely will like the other. Obviously, with compendiums, they can run you a pretty penny, so it may not be something you want to jump at. But if you know someone who's a huge fan of the series and you're looking for a gift, it may be a really good one to pick up, because I will say IDW, when it comes to their collections, they put out really quality stuff. I mean, they actually even put out collections for like other companies' stuff because they put a lot of work and effort into it. So you're going to get something that, there's a lot of time and effort. It's a good looking package. Just looking at the cover and the general design of it looks really solid. So it will be something that will be one of those books that's probably worth the money you'll be putting into it. The new graphic novel from Image this week is Jim Lives, and this is a story about a father trying to find his missing son. His son is a newspaper reporter that the last message he got from him was the one that said, "Jim Morrison is still alive, I'll tell you everything," but after that message has been sent, he's vanished and no one knows where he went. So his father is going off to Italy, where he's last been, to see if he can find what happened to his son and hopefully find his son. And this is actually a team that last year brought us this book, Paul is Dead, which I just got and I have not read yet, but I'm excited for it. And now that they have a new book coming out this week, so clearly they have a thing for comic books that have some sort of musical backing. This dealing with the Beatles, this of course dealing with Jim Morrison. So if you did really love this book, and I did see a lot of acclaim for this book, it was really highly praised, know that this creative team does have a new graphic novel coming out this week. If you do love music, you're a huge Doors fan, huge Jim Morrison fan, or you just like stories about someone trying to find a missing person, because those can be really solid too, you'll be able to check this book out. Again, it's coming from Image Comics, and it should be available at most of your local comic book stores. From DC this week is DC's Hope at World's End hardcover, and this collects the Digital First series that was put out. And this series kind of takes place in between the different DCeased universe, because you had the first DCeased book and then the second DCeased book that was Dead Planet, and this is kind of links them both. And the one thing about this being a Digital First is that you did tend to see kind of shifting artists, but I will say the quality wise, it tends to be really good. And of course, this is still written by Tom Taylor with a shifting creative team. And I will say, Tom Taylor is not foreign to the world of Digital First comics. His run on the Justice League books that were Digital First based upon the video game, those really, I think, helped establish his career in spite of the fact that he was working with so many different artists. And when you read it digitally, it's typically kind of broken down in two panels, but they fixed that and they changed it for the physical format. So if you're a person who has been loving DCeased and you hate digital comics, or you haven't read the digital version of them and you want to read them in physical form, you can now get this just missing chapter at your local comic book store this Wednesday. Coming out this week is Resistance, and this is written by Val McDermott with art by Catherine Briggs. And Val McDermott is maybe not a name people know in the world of comics, but she's a really accomplished writer. She's known as the British queen of crime when it comes to prose, but now she's transitioning over to the world of comics or graphic novels for this Resistance story. And it's about a world in which a pandemic happens, and it focuses on the people trying to fight back against this deadly pandemic. And it does seem like it's something that's maybe hitting a little close to home with COVID happening, but maybe I don't know if this was written prior to that. I don't know if it's good timing or bad timing, but it's really great. When we do get these writers who are really well accomplished, I think, in prose or whatever that may be, and try the comic book format. Hopefully that'll bring people that don't typically read comics into the comic book world. Is it always effective? Like, I mentioned with the writer who's coming from the world of movies, trying to write a comic book, it's a very different type of medium. I will say, doing a graphic novel maybe makes the most sense. What you tend to see the most with prose writers is that they put too much on the page and they don't trust the artist enough. Will that be the case here? There are some people that have made the transition relatively really quickly. For example, we just talked about Locke and Key, and Joe Hill was a prose writer before writing comics, and he made the transition really seamlessly. Like, you would think that he came being a comic book writer first. Will that be the case here? I'm not sure, but if you're looking for something different, or looking for a new creator to kind of get behind, if you are a fan of her other work, her other prose work, you'll be having a new comic book you can check out. And this might be one of those books that you may not be able to find at your local comic book store because it doesn't have the types of names that come from the companies, like an Image or something like that. But if you're interested on it, you maybe go to the comic book store and ask them and just say, hey, can you get this for me? They could probably order it from Diamond, or last bet, maybe check your local bookstore as well if you have one of those. Either way, it'll be coming out this week. Also coming out this week is Factory Summers by Guy Delesi, and this is about a story of him growing up and when he dealt with working in a mill and the long hours and the work that went into that. Your personal kind of memoir in a way. And as a person that loves graphic memoirs, this is something that will be right up my alley. It may not be everyone's cup of tea. If you love your superhero action, a guy working at the mill may not be the most exciting read. But what you tend to get with books like this is a slice of life, real human drama, and kind of what will drive a person in a job maybe they don't love, or what general life can be like for individuals that are just trying to get by, or those that have the admirations for bigger and better things. So, it's your common trope. I don't know exactly what country it's coming from, but it is a book that is translated, and I do love reading comics from other countries and just the different styles. Guy Delesi is a pretty accomplished writer. He's had a number of different books, all focusing on different things. He had a book about Jerusalem, for example, and all looking at general different life. This one seems to be more personal, again, looking at his actual life. So it might be really cool just seeing someone coming from a different world, very in more ways than one, telling their story. I do really tend to like that type of stuff. So if you do too, you may want to check out this book this week. All right, now I talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new series, and trades and graphic novels. I'm going to get to my pick of the week, the book that I'm most excited about coming out this week. The pick of the week this week, it was a really hard choice. I was very close to going with Usagi Yojimbo. It was neck and neck with this, but it being a new series, I think that's why I was anticipating it a little more, because this book could be really good, or it could kind of fall on its face right away. So my most anticipated book, my most anticipated starting point for this week is Supergirl World of Tomorrow #1. This is written by Tom King with art by Bellicose Everly, and I know Tom King is now one of those names that some people really hate his work because maybe the Batman run didn't end like they wanted it to, or me, I've really enjoyed his stuff for the most part. Like, I've really enjoyed Rorschach right now is one of my favorite comics with DC, or really out period. Vision, for example, I did like the majority of his Batman run. Not everything clicked with me. And I did actually like when he took on the character of Superman for those Walmart books. So how will he take on the character of Supergirl? And Supergirl is a character that I've not read a lot. I read, the Future State books. I read Supergirl being super, mostly because of Joelle Jones's art. And Bellicose Everly, hopefully I'm saying that name correctly, is an artist that I've enjoyed in the past, specifically with the work that she did on The Dreaming. And when I look at her art, it's not the type of art that I say, oh, this would make a great Supergirl artist or superhero artist, which is why I'm excited, because I do feel like DC is pretty notorious for having a pretty standard house style, which I can get kind of bored with at times. So I do like it when they experiment and try different artists or styles that don't necessarily fit their norm. And I do feel like they do that a lot with Tom King. Like Mr. Gerard, for example, is not someone that I think is normally the type of artist that they go with for like a Batman book, but Tom King was able to get him on that. And I do think that is something that is Tom King's strength as well. He knows how to pick good artists and match his style with the artists that he's working with, whether it be Mr. George, Doc Shaner, all the different Batman artists. And hopefully that will be the case here. And I think this could be a breakout hit for someone like Bellicose Everly, who's, a name that has done a lot of good work, but it clearly is not a household name. But if you put her with someone like Tom King, who, love him or hate him, he does get a lot of attention. And if this book can kind of blow up and be a quality book. And I think it's great that we're getting a Supergirl book, because I do feel like there's been a lot of male-centric books for DC, but not a lot of female-centric books. When they have so many great female characters that have been around for such a long time, hopefully this will be another one. Plus, we'll get to see why exactly does Supergirl have a sword. That could be fun too. This does seem like to be a major week for just comic book starting points and comics in general. Last week was a bit lackluster. This week was really packed. So that has me excited. I guess it's the nature of comics, or the nature of when you have a 5 Wednesday month as well. So anyways, that's it for me for this week. Let me know what you're really excited about coming out this week. If you want to check out my top 10 video, check out it below. I'll have another installment of the Ed Brubaker retrospective on Friday, a Graphic Thoughts video on Wednesday, so be on the lookout for those. I know there are a ton of comic book channels out there, so I appreciate any view, any like, any comment. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Just remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.